Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for Ad Age's Town Hall, addressing how the ad world can better support minority-owned businesses. I'm Janine Poggi, Assistant Managing Editor here at Ad Age, and I am joined by my co-host for today, reporter Jessica Wall. Hey, Jess.
Hi, Janine. Hi, everyone. It's great to see so many of you out there, and thank you to all who submitted questions. We will try to get to as many of them during the next 90 minutes as we can. And feel free to post comments or additional questions on our social channels during the broadcast.
Ending systemic racism in the ad world requires brands and agencies to take a hard look at the businesses they are investing in and working with to create and distribute their marketing messages. Despite Black, Hispanic, Asian Pacific, and Native American people making up 40% of the US population, we know they receive just a single-digit percentage of marketing industry spend. The goal of today's town hall will be solutions. We will facilitate a candid conversation with minority-owned business leaders and allies about the barriers minority-owned businesses are facing in 2021 and what, as an industry, should be done to correct the course. While we will certainly want to address the problems, we really hope this forum will provide more go-forward action steps. During the next 90 minutes, we will look to discuss how the industry should look to work with minority-owned agencies beyond the campaigns designed to reach specific diverse communities. We will also address the need for brands to reevaluate their media spend and shift more dollars into minority-owned media companies. We will also look to answer some of the many questions we received from minority-owned companies seeking to build investment and find points of entry to working with the ad world.
For our first panel, we're going to talk about identifying and breaking the barriers. To kick things off, we're going to identify misconceptions around working with minority-owned businesses and address the questions on how to create sustained partnerships. Joining us to discuss these topics are Ahmad Islam, CEO and co-founder of 1035, Coltrane Curtis, founder and managing partner at Team Epiphany, and Linda Ong, CEO and founder of Cultique.
Good morning. Hello.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate your time and lending your insights to this conversation. So I'd actually like to start with the identifier that we're actually used here in the title of our town hall, minority owned. We've received a lot of feedback and questions and comments about how to actually identify these businesses. And while for certification purposes, this is the phrase most commonly used, is there another way that's better to identify businesses that are diversity led? And also, is it an open definition or does it only apply to the BIPOC community? Coltrane, I thought maybe we could start with you. Just, for the purposes of setting up the framework here, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, this is a tough one for me because I really feel like, what we're really talking about is opportunity here, right? When you think about the challenges for my business and, we've been in business for 16 years, independently owned, no funding, no mentorship, none of the above, right? We're literally swimming in uncharted waters, right? And we've been able to do it well for 16 years. But I think the big piece for us is about the opportunity. We've been able to build our business, to a substantial size where what happens is that our business has to rotate at a very high level of a RPM level. And so what we wind up having is too many clients equaling whatever our revenue is going to be. And normally most agencies that are minority owned have fewer clients to be able to reach that same number. And so what we do is put so much pressure on our operation that that's been the biggest piece. That's been the biggest challenge of our business. That's been the biggest barrier. When you really start thinking about, what brands can do or what brands can do to kind of reach shops like us, it's really about self-selection and making sure you have people in your organization that understand the culture and the community. They are the ones that identify as not necessarily, the traditional RFP processes. It's internal people at brands who really identify the differentiation between us and other agencies and understanding that the goals that they need to be able to reach are completely different than what gen market agencies are looking for. Does that answer that for you?
Yeah, I'm curious from Ahmad, what are your thoughts as well on, the phrase minority owned? Is that one that we should continue to use? Is there a better phrase that we should use, for the purposes of like this conversation and as we identify organizations?
It's interesting. I think to Coltrane's point, it ultimately comes down to opportunity. But at the end of the day, I think that it's necessary at times to, I think, take certain measures to create those opportunities and really create what I'll call, habits within organizations. And so I think ultimately understanding how we identify as a minority and what that means, I do think is important, because I think oftentimes organizations, when given the opportunity to operate in the gray, to kind of skirt the true intent of a minority spend, they'll look for workarounds. And so I think in an environment where we're still trying to encourage people to invest in minority-owned businesses or businesses owned by folks from underrepresented communities, it is important to be able to identify those organizations, understand who we are. I think I agree with Coltrane that there are formal ways to identify these organizations through certifications and whatnot, but the diversity of your organization also is very, very important in having people that understand where to look, that understand the folks that are underrepresented minority organizations that are also doing great work. And so I think until we get to a point where it is habit and a part of how companies do business to go out and seek minority-owned organizations as just a way of how they operate, I think it is important to still be able to identify these organizations. One, hopefully organizations that do great work, but I do think that minority ownership, until supporting those companies becomes habit, is important.
Ahmed, let's stick with you for a minute. Let's talk about some of the barriers, both real and perceived, to working with minority-owned businesses. Can we clear up any misconceptions there might be around working with minority-owned agencies, brands, and media companies? Can you identify maybe a perceived obstacle and help us reframe it?
It's interesting. I think one of the primary barriers is that minority-owned companies and organizations can only do minority work. It's funny. I had a client ask me a couple of weeks ago after we had gone through, or a potential client after we had gone through a creds presentation, and the question was, "Hey, I see you guys do amazing work from a multicultural standpoint, but what's your general market work like?" And for me, that's like asking a professional baker if they can make pancakes. I mean, at the end of the day, the cultural expertise that's required to do cultural work is really, in some ways, to me, in my mind, a step above and beyond where you have to go to do kind of standard general market work. I think when you look at a lot of these organizations, I probably can speak for Coltrane as well as myself, at least, most of our teams come from general market shops. We've got experiences with the Leos and the Sachis and the DDBs of the world, where we've all come together in a minority-owned company. But the misperception is, for some reason, once we leave those places where we were, in fact, doing general market work at a high level, we suddenly lose that ability because we now work in a minority-owned shop. And I think that is one of the primary misconceptions, is that our capability is limited to, the race, ethnicity, and identity of our owners.
Yeah, and one quick point there. I mean, I think the term multicultural is just loaded. It's probably Latin for getting, the smallest percentage of a pie as possible. And I never aspired to be in a multicultural agency. My dad ran an agency for 20, 25 years. And, his favorite book that he gave me was about positioning, and it was more about, if you don't position yourself, the world will position you. And I like to just make a point here about multiculturalism is, when they ask me if I can do gen market work, I like to be able to ask, in gen market work, do multicultural work? Because the reality is the epicenter of all culture comes from Black and brown culture. So if I can master that, that means I can literally, hit the snooze button through activating gen market, because we literally sit at the top and the precipice of what's controlling gen market. And that's basically where we sit. So to ask if we can do gen market is almost insulting, but the insults are basically, you can use them as fuel, or you can use them to cripple you. And for so long, and I just think, being who we are in the space, you use that kryptonite as fuel, if you will.
Linda, I'd like to bring you in here for a bit. What are some of the misconceptions that you're seeing and hearing out there about minority-owned businesses and working with minority-owned businesses?
Yeah, well, thank you all for having us. And I would echo what Ahmad and Coltrane have said. I think from my perspective, the term minority in itself helps further a perception that there's something less than. And so I really resist that label. Also, being a woman, I have sort of double strikes against me. So I prefer to think about the future and how these businesses are really emerging voices. And our team has always been a general market expert, but what we're experts in are cultures and subcultures. And so for us, it's not about casting a specific Asian lens because I'm Asian, but we have people of all different backgrounds. And I think that's the value that we bring to clients. And so when it comes to businesses that are, BIPOC owned or owned by other marginalized groups, it's really about bringing perspective. And I think that can be coming from many, many different walks of life. And it's those mixes of experiences that I think are really important for people to tap into. And when we look at general market, we always talk about having cred with the core. And the core could be Latinx, the core could be Black, the core could be sci-fi fans, it could be soccer fans. It's really about understanding and weaponizing empathy, which we try to do every day.
We lost Jessica. So are there any real barriers that the industry should be aware of in order to put procedures in place to make the process more seamless? Ahmed, want to take that one?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, one of the primary barriers is at times just a willingness and an understanding of the value that diversity or lack of understanding, candidly, of the value that diversity brings within the context of your agency partners. I think far too often you hear excuses like scale or experience with brands like ours as reasons not why not. And I think ultimately it's important. I mean, research has shown, data shows that diversity is a huge plus for organizations. And I think understanding the need and the importance of embracing diverse partners, diverse perspectives, diverse point of views, the point that was just made, is all a critical component of really future success for a lot of these larger organizations. And what you have, though, is oftentimes a commitment in the C-suite to embracing diversity and understanding the importance that it brings. But at times that commitment, unless there are formal means of creating accountability, that commitment doesn't necessarily push further down into the organization. And so while there is oftentimes a commitment, there isn't necessarily the actions that put that commitment, bring that commitment into reality.
You have a fan I see on LinkedIn, no name, but you have a fan base. So there you go. So Linda, from a consumer perspective, why is it important for brands and agencies to develop a strategy for working with diversity-led companies?
Well, it's interesting. I wrote a piece a couple of months ago about the need to decolonize advertising, because if you look at the history of advertising, even from the 1800s, it was always created as a tool of colonialism. And if you think about the modern advertising industry, the modern industrial advertising complex, as I like to call it, it's predicated on adults 18 to 49 with upscale disposable income. That's sort of the height. Right. And when that happens, what that creates is a ghetto for literally anybody who doesn't fit in that in those categories. And I think we see that not only having an effect on advertising in identifying, for decades, how are we supposed to live? What's aspirational in society? And for many decades, it's been to be white. And that has now been luckily dismantled. But we have an opportunity to really reframe the industry. And we see with we've known this for decades, but we saw with the election that demographics and identity are not reliable indicators for how people behave. It's really cultural and emotional. So really looking at cultures, understanding them is really essential for bringing about real change.
Let's talk a little bit about where brands and agencies can start in finding and vetting minority-owned businesses. Ahmed, do you want to discuss that?
Yeah, I mean, It's interesting because a lot of times, I feel like Bigfoot or the Loch Ness monster, and realistically, I don't think we're that hard to find. I mean, I think Ad Age has put out lists post May 25th, post the murder of George Floyd, when all the commitments and promises came out. There were a number of lists that were provided and created. I think that part of the opportunity is to actually actively search and actively reach out and connect with leaders of these organizations and really kind of put the same effort and emphasis into identifying talent from underserved organizations that you would put into identifying employees, or you would put it identifying general market agencies. I think the other opportunity is, especially I think within the Black community, I know for sure, it's a very close-knit group. We all know each other. On the brand side as well as on the agency side, there's a connectivity that exists that can actually be tapped into, especially when you have diversity within your organization. And so I think it's also important to build your internal diversity, because that in fact will give you access to and a conduit to a lot of these organizations that you may be having a hard time finding right now.
For those of you watching at home, if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to chime in, leave them on our social channels. We have a great group of guests here who I'm sure are eager to answer your questions. So please feel free to ask those and any comments. Coltrane, did you want to weigh in on that as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think overall, right, I'm a marketer, right? So you can back in, zoom out. So we'll take this from like 30,000 foot view perspective. But I think like we're at a revolution within our industry, right? And I think when you have a revolution, you have to kind of blow things up, right? And I think for so long, we've been asking for this industry to change, begging for it to change internally. And the reality is that it's not changing, right? Brands haven't really understood that, not having a diversity and inclusion kind of philosophy or strategy is not an inclusion to win. It's not a philosophy to win. I think for us and for Team Epiphany specifically, we've always been an agency outlier. And have always, shunned the term agency, firm, shop, all those things, because they really don't ladder up and don't really meet kind of like who we are, And so I think as trying to hope and find change within a system that's been broken forever, I think that we would always like to, think about this as a Malcolm versus a Martin kind of approach. And we're very Malcolm-like, and I think I like to be able to understand the fact, or trying to create the new future for creatives in the industry that look like us, right? And I don't think that's in a traditional holding company model, because they have never been able to find an agency like a Team Epiphany, and nor has it been for people that seek to be entrepreneurs or employees at big brands. It hasn't really worked for them. And so we're basically sitting here arguing about or frustrated about what hasn't really happened. But I think what really needs to go down is thinking about a new holding company model, right? Where, we're talking about opportunity, but opportunity can't be reached without investment. I've been a person that has never been able to raise a single dime, and that's indicative of the challenge in this industry. And so I think if we're able to pool resources and create our own holding companies that are the homes for agencies like myself or others that would be interested in joining, I think then there you will find change in an industry that has failed to support the amount of content, the amount of credibility, cultural acceptance, and everything that our communities have dialed up. It's time for us to really be able to own the entities in which we live in, that are able to receive the big opportunities. Because as we know, this is a holding company led industry. And until they are, share some of the power or are forced to share some of their power, we're never going to really realize to see the wins that we want in this game.
Yeah, we're going to spend some time later in this program talking about investment and sponsorship and all of those things. So I think that's a very important topic, and one that we've received a lot of questions on. So hopefully we'll get to some of that a little bit later today. But Coltrane, I'd like to stay with you for a minute. So what should top management then in advertising organizations do to create a culture which rewards or incentivizes D&I efforts like vendor relationships?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to, one, hire people there who are strategic risk takers, who want to actually, affect or be that change that we want to see. I think time and time again, you get somewhat familiar faces in seats of decisions at brands, and they tend to be the actual worst decision for companies like myself, because what they are is that's success for them. They're not thinking about the ecosystem or the communities that birthed them and how they're supporting those communities. They're more interested in supporting themselves. So it becomes a singular kind of connotation or philosophy from those individuals versus thinking about the community as a whole. And so I would say the first thing really starts with bringing the right people in who are connected to communities and culture, who then understand how to self-select other people who are part of their networks that do different things. Amat literally nailed it. We're connected to tribes and communities and families. And the reality is brands have to start hiring those people, right? And those people aren't the easiest to find, so they say. But if you're asking those who are connected to those communities, we know the ones and we know those individuals that we would like to support and that have always been a good beacon and a voice, right? So finding like industry veterans that have been in seats for 20 years, you're not going to find the change nor the inclusion that you want. But identifying new people who are talented and who are representative of culture as a whole, as opposed to the individual, that's where they should start. But it has to start from an HR perspective internally, and then making sure you pick the right people who want to engender change. And you got to want to do it, but, not having, a strategy or solution for diversity and inclusion is a brand killer. And I think culture is making brands feel that pain now.
Linda, I'd like for you to weigh in on this. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I 100% agree with everything Coltrane said. I think that one thing that general market agencies really need to understand is that they're going to have to do the work here. And that, the reason that we're in the situation we're in is when you're in a fast-paced industry, the habits that we have, and I think Ahmad talked about people creating new habits and new muscle memory, but the habits that everybody has that are human is to call the people we know. And I think that, both in recruiting, that's happened, or people recruit people that are like them. That's always been really well documented. And I think what you're seeing, and the company that is our partner, Civic, they've invested in their DEI council in looking at building out a vendor support network. And it's always easier to do it if you get ahead of it and not wait until I need somebody, who do you have? That's never a good time to start looking for a new group. And I think part of these emerging businesses that also needs to be recognized is that many opportunities have not been given to them in the past. So the level of experience or the level of relevant cred or background may not be there, but the skill sets and the perspectives are there. And so it does take an investment. And these guys have talked a lot about investment. Investment isn't just money. Investment is time. Investor is being a stakeholder in somebody else's business and finding perhaps partners to help grow, help sponsor or mentor, bring along, possibly acquire, to allow you to gain that expertise internally. But it is going to require an investment. It is going to be work. And that is something that companies really need to recognize.
Great. And Linda, maybe we can stick with you and then open it up. But I'm curious, with the current racial climate, how do you decipher between brands that are looking to elevate by investing in minority-owned businesses over exploiting the relationship as cover? And does that matter to you as long as they're spending money with minority-owned businesses?
For me, it does matter. I think we are looking for partners. We're not looking for clients. And I think when you're looking at having shared values and shared goals, you're looking for a relationship. And in any relationship, it needs to be two ways. So I think, we've seen over the past year situations where agencies have reached out to people of color, and it's been very clear that they didn't have their motives in the right place. So I think part of the education process is to not enable those kinds of behavior, but look at them as either opportunities for learning or, educating a potential client by moving on.
Coltrane, Ahmed, did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, I agree. I think for us, I think it's slightly different between agencies and client brands. I think with a lot of client brands, it's important to understand, everybody's intent changed again in May or June of last year. I think it was important to understand where they were in their process. There were brands that had relationships with culture but weren't committed. There were brands that had done nothing. There were brands that were committed but knew they could do more. And so from a brand standpoint, I'm always just looking to understand where they are, and then to understand if there is true interest and true opportunity to make progress. And part of what we know within culture, especially and even in these relationships, is that it's important to have sustained engagement. And so we're much less interested in one-offs right now, because I think that shows, to your point, a desire to kind of pimp the culture versus making an investment in minority-owned businesses and creating partnerships. On the agency side, I mean, just being candid, I think a lot of agencies right now, general market agencies, are really trying to candidly just kind of shortcut things. I think they're looking to partner with multicultural agencies to either, kind of pick their brains and kind of suck some of their intellectual capital out, or, poach people. And so I think I'm much more cautious about partnerships with agencies, candidly, than I am with brands. I think brands, part of the opportunity is to show them the value of investing in culture and investing in diversity and what that can do for their bottom line.
Yep. And I think for me, you got to be able to get up in the morning and look at the man in the mirror and like what you see, right? And so I think that has value here. I think the other piece for me specifically is about what type of marketer are you and what type of brand do they want to exude, right? We talk about multicultural markets, all these things. I think, what we like to subscribe to is a sense of aspirational marketing, caring about not just where the consumer is, but marketing to where they're going. And in order to market to where they're going, you need to be insightful and care about who they are. Mm-hmm. Right. And if you can't do that, and if brands seem like they don't subscribe to that mentality of understanding the nuances, the good, the bad, and understanding that every consumer has an aspiration, and understanding that we need to market to that destination, it's like throwing a football. If you throw the football where the receiver was, it was a pick six going the other way. But if you were able to read the defense and understand where the receiver is running, that's aspirational marketing at its finest. And so if brands are really subscribing to that, that's an opportunity for us to have a long-term partnership than just a client. And that's what we're ultimately looking for. But those aspirations are mirrored by not just brand, but also the people that work there. And I'd also like to say that we choose brands not only by the luster and the sex appeal of their name, but also the people that we get the opportunity to work with, because those are the people that drive the energy behind a brand, even when they may not have the best intentions in mind, right? And so I would like to just introduce a term of aspirational marketing. If brands can align with that, then that's a potential partner for us.
So before we wrap, I do have one more question that we received. It's an important one on tracking progress. Someone wrote in that everyone is keen to say they are investing in utilizing the services and offerings from minority-owned businesses. But how is the ad industry actually moving the needle in awarding contracts to these businesses, and how can that be tracked? Ahmad, do you want to start with this?
It's interesting. I mean, we've had a lot of discussion around this, and honestly, I think this is something that Ad Age could potentially take a lead role in with other kind of industry professionals, because I think there's an opportunity to, even coming up on the 1-year anniversary of George Floyd's murder and this sudden interest in investing in culture and Black-owned businesses or BIPOC businesses, to really kind of have a bit of a check-in, have a bit of a report card. There were a lot of promises made. There are a lot of commitments made. 1 year into it, I think it would be smart just to see where we are. And it's not in the spirit of putting anybody on blast, but it is in the spirit of creating accountability within the industry, because I think that accountability is a huge part of creating and facilitating and inspiring progress. And so I think that there is an opportunity, and it would be amazing if it was self-reported, and that the organizations that have made promises, or the organizations that didn't make promises but have made great progress, could talk about that. Because I think it's also critical to understand the importance that these commitments have on your business and on your bottom line, the importance that these commitments have on, the morale and the spirit of your internal folks who value culture. And so I think really formalizing and creating an opportunity for brands it's not about putting people on blast, and it's not about patting yourselves on the back, but it is about creating industry accountability and checking to see that people are doing more than just posting a black square in June, but are really about trying to make real progress that's going to be sustainable.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that is something for Ad Age that is a priority and something we will be looking to do and holding, agencies and brands asking for updates and progress reports on what they have been doing, in the year since. So yes, that is an important one. Thank you, Ahmad. Anyone else want to weigh in before we close?
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's on the term investment. I think investment comes in many shapes, forms, or fashion, and sometimes the investment might not be financial, right? I think we want to be able to, it might be too late for me because I'm the old head here, but I think there is an opportunity for other shops, people to walk in, our shoes and do a better job, right? And I think the only way in which we can do that is to invest into them properly and understanding what they truly need. And you can't understand what these businesses need until you understand the challenges that they have, right? And so sitting down and giving us a bundle of money is great, but the reality is if it's not smart money and not creating more opportunity, then we don't need it. And for 16 years, we haven't taken it because those dollars don't necessarily lead to more opportunity. And so I think we need to really think about how are we investing. I think there can be also investments between businesses who are part of this community. If we were able to give equity to one another in our own businesses, and share the equity amongst ourselves as opposed to stretching yourself thin with people that are just here to check a box for their P&L, right? And so I would say just the term investment, I would really, decode it. And I would really deconstruct it, but I think it comes in a lot of shape, forms, and fashion. But the only issue is that the people who are investing and spending money, the only thing that they know how to do is park money with you and think that you're like a stock or a bond. But the reality is it's a good money, it's a good sound investment if the opportunity to grow your business comes along with that financial investment.
I just add one word: transparency.
Great.
Well, thank you so much, Ahmad, Coltrane, and Linda, for helping us kick off today. And we look forward to continuing the conversation.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
So just a reminder for those of you watching at home, these are all questions that have been submitted by you ahead of the program. But if you have any additional questions, feel free to leave them on our social channels, and we will also try to answer those here. So next up, as we've heard from Coltrane, Ahmad, and Linda in this previous panel, one of the biggest challenges for minority-owned business historically has been finding and building some investment. We received a lot of questions from the audience pertaining to the ways minority-owned businesses can seek sponsorship and looking for other tips on starting out. So here to help answer those questions, we have Isabel Rafferty Zavala, founder and CEO of Canela Media, and Salim Holder, CEO of 4th Avenue Market.
Hi.
Hello. Hi,
Hello.
Isabel. Hi,
Hi.
Salim.
Hello.
Thank you both for joining us.
Hello. So sponsorship. Oh, thank you so much. We're so excited to have you here. Sponsorship's one of the key areas that an ad agency can be of assistance to minority business owners. How can first-time owners with little or no connections or relationships in the ad world get through those gatekeepers and get a fair shot at meaningful sponsorship dollars? Isabel, do you want to take this one?
Sure. I think for us, what has been the most helpful, most agencies have like ambassadors within, or they're the consultants within the agency fully dedicated in advertising to minorities. Sometimes they don't manage those funds, but they're the first great step to reach out to them because they tend to be very helpful in opening doors with investment teams. So I'll say most major agencies have these minority or these multicultural buyers or consultants. That will be the first people I'll go after. And then persistence. I think, yes, there's a lot of people in the agencies. The number one goal is not to invest in minority business, and many times it's not one that's going to be opening the door for those teams. It's just you're going to have to be very persistent and really have a clear differentiation in the market to get their attention. So not only calling them, email them. Before COVID, it was dropping them cupcakes, whatever you can do to get in front of them so they can see you, that there's a person behind that email. So I think the combination of those two have been the most successful ways to get within those agencies.
Celine,
Yeah.
do you
Go ahead.
want to add to that? I have
Yeah,
I have a similar question of what are the requirements for minority-owned businesses to get investment eligibility?
Yeah, so I think that with this, I think to answer both questions, I think one part of it is, at the end of the day, companies are absolutely looking for how can I create more value in the community? How can I create more value? So as an entrepreneur, the first and most important thing you can do is be that brand, that business, that service that's creating a crazy amount of value in whatever community it is that you're serving, because that tends to pique interest. But I think, to the point that was also just made, it's like, yeah, you're going to have to be persistent. But I think to this other question, the other part is that it shouldn't just only be on the Black entrepreneur or to that minority business owner. I do think that there's a mindset that needs to shift within some of these organizations as well, in order to find more of these people that can be more of value, or to be able to create more value for them. And that mind shift that needs that mindset that needs to shift is one that these businesses are not charity organizations. They don't lack because they don't have the ability, or they're not knowledgeable. It's simply about being able to have access to the market. And so if you look at it in a way as a business owner, you look at it in a way and say, how can I grow the value of my business by tapping into something that's outside of my typical network of individuals I work with, or vendors, or people I support? All of a sudden the opportunity starts to get much bigger. So as a minority business owner, of course, you have to be persistent and you have to create something of value. But I think as these organizations, we shouldn't just be sitting here waiting for minority business owners to come and stumble onto our desk. Like, we have to be more aggressive and shift our mindset in order to be able to find the right businesses to invest in.
Celine, can you actually talk a little bit about what you're doing at 4th Avenue Market, what the premise is there, and how you're sort of working towards that for the companies that you're working with?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so for 4th Ave Market, what we recognize is that there really is, there's an opportunity to drive significant, a lot more transparency to the market, as you have consumers who want to buy from Black-owned businesses, but aren't sure what businesses are Black-owned. You have Black-owned businesses that are struggling to get seen in a retail environment that often has forgotten about our needs, or has overlooked our needs or desires. And so as a result, what we said at 4th Ave Market is, as much as we try to fight to get a seat at the table, we said, we can create our own table. And what we can do is we can create opportunities for those businesses from our community to be able to get in front of more consumers. And at the same time, we can work with those brands that are getting in front of consumers and find ways that we can contribute value back to those communities. In the same way we did with Black Wall Street in Tulsa, Oklahoma, 4th Ave Market is taking the 21st century Black Wall Street and bringing this to life, and getting opportunities for consumers, opportunities for community, and opportunities for businesses themselves. And we see it as truly, we feel like today there doesn't have to be a choice between helping and purpose and profits, that we feel like purpose and profits can be together. And that's really what 4th Ave Market is all about.
Great. Isabel, I'd like to talk about how much minority-owned businesses can hope to get from formal or informal minority set-asides. What percentage of revenue, for example, could they expect to get from government contracts that require a certain portion of the contract to go to minority businesses?
I wish I could tell you there was a clear, I think that we lack that transparency to understand what percentage you really can get. We work mostly with our agencies and brands, and it's unclear still. And even if there's a percentage assigned from a brand dedicated to minority business, sadly, that investment is not many times invested in minority in business, because there's a lack of understanding of what makes a minority business from a business that targets minorities. So what we see is all these brands come out and say, we're going to be doing all this investment in minority-owned businesses. And then when we approach the buyers, we're like, great, your CEO did this huge speech. Everybody, it was in the cover of all the magazines on their dedication to minority communities. And then we approach them like, are you going to invest in minority? Oh, yeah, we already did. And we're like, really? Yeah, we're working with the big networks, Univision and Telemundo, that target minorities. And you're like, hold on a second. Those are public traded companies. Your CEO just said out loud that certain percentage was going to assign to these businesses. So there's a lack of education. So although they announce these percentages and they say that they have these commitments, sadly, not many times come down to these businesses. It's given to other companies because there's a lack of education. Not because you target minority, you're a minority business. There's a lot of things. I mean, you have to be owned by a minority. So I think agencies are not educated and buyers to understand the difference, and whatever is easier, whatever checks that box so they can say, yes, I'm supporting those communities, ends up happening. So I cannot give you a percentage because I don't think that's really what ends up happening, although these corporations are hoping that those percentages assigned to these companies, many times they're not.
Speaking to that education and understanding that, Salim, are agencies and brands aware of the businesses that are certified as minority business enterprise? If you are an MBE, what's the best way to let media agencies know?
So I've never worked in a media agency, so I'm gonna preface this comment and say, I'm not sure what they really know or what they don't. But what I will say is that I do believe that there's this idea that exists still, and I mentioned this before, of this idea that helping Black businesses or minority-owned businesses, it's like good. It's it's like it's charity business, and like it's goodwill. But the reality is it's not goodwill, it's good business. As we think about how we can grow, as we think about where the population is going, where the needs are going, when you think about more consumers who want that transparency, then a shift in mentality really needs to exist. I think too many people just want to check a box and say, oh, wait, I'm helping this minority-owned business, let me just check the box. But the reality is, like, there's a lot of businesses that are actually contributing to the community, a lot of businesses are contributing to the needs of consumers that are out there. And I believe that agencies can do a much better job of thinking about it as not charity work, but thinking about it like, how can we truly grow our business and add to the value of our organizations? I think in doing that, the mindset shifts. When you think about it as a charity, it's like, yeah, let me just write a check to anybody that has a certification. Great, I did my part. I gave them $1,000. Everybody's happy. But when you're really thinking about growing your business, you're finding businesses that may not look like the other businesses you continue to work with, but businesses that can offer a tremendous amount of value. And so I don't know if companies know that the minority business, I imagine they do recognize that it exists. But I think more importantly than just the certification is looking at the value that the company, that organization contributes to a community that you actually want to work with as well, authentically. So if you have an MBE, I think it's important, to put that everywhere on your LinkedIn, your profile, everywhere you can, so people can see it. But I think I think again, from a company's perspective, it's deeper than just, do you have the certification? And it's more about the connection and the value you're contributing to the community.
Is that a question that you're asked, though, either Isabel or Salim? If you're an MBE, is that a question that's regularly asked, or is that not really something that's asked of you?
And I wish it was. I thought so when I was not, and I work with with other companies that were media focused for Latinos. I got those questions, so I was like, okay, this is going to be huge. So when we launched the company, we went for all the certifications, and it's a very long process. But we're like, this is going to be very important in shifting our business and being able to differentiate ourselves from other competitors. And we will go into these agencies, and we'll be like First Light, look at us, we're certified female, minority owned, like we were so proud, and everybody will look at us like, like, what is that for? And we're like, what? Don't you know your CEO, the head of your company, has been saying that they're investing in these businesses? So I think there's a lack of education and communication within organizations, that there's these beautiful things that we hear in these brands saying and publishing out there. But when it comes to activation, where the actual buyers are activating these media, there's no one that is ensuring that these tactics are implementing. So I think we lack in the agencies and the brands someone that is like the police within, say, hey, are we really supporting these businesses? Are we educating our staffs what it is? So I'll say the majority of agencies and buyers are not even aware of these certifications. It's becoming a little bit more popular. But the issue again is making sure that it's accurate. They send you an email, are you certified? And you answer yes. And that's it. That's all they request. What that does, it opens a window for people that are not certified, sadly, to go and say, yes, we're certified. So I've seen also a huge strength of media companies. Sellers are so hungry, they're claiming they're certified, but they're not. And agencies are not really doing their homework and saying, where's your certifications? So I think there's a huge education gap from the idealistic side that we want to enforcing those into reality.
I just to add really quick,
Oh,
I just
no,
want
go
to make
ahead,
a really
Celine.
quick, just a really quick comment on that. I think the challenge again exists that people are not able to quantify what is the value of working with women-owned business or minority-owned. Like I've had conversations with agency owners who are like, well, I get the whole idea about, you know, hiring more, you know, Black or minority talent on my team, but I don't really get how that's going to add more to the bottom line. And I think that's a real issue, that if people aren't quantifying, then they see it as just a nice thing to do.
A charity, like you say, when there's actually a huge value. And
Yeah.
or they feel like you said, that there is, like, you're giving something away. So if
Yes.
I'm partnering with this minority business, means the quality is not going to be good.
Yes.
Means that, and actually not. I think if you talk to them, if your job is to target minorities, nobody better to know those minorities than people that come from those. So nobody better to target Latinos than their own Latinos that understand the culture. So you're not giving away something. You're not doing a charity. You're enhancing your strategy, your business, by partnering. And I'm not saying all the minority-owned business are incredible. Like, not all the general market business are incredible. But there's some jewels out there. And if people take the time to research, to understand these businesses, they might be surprised how you're not compromising working with them, but you're enhancing your business.
But asking businesses to get verified, or asking if a business is verified, sounds like it's adding a barrier, whereas the goal would be to remove barriers to get people to work with these agencies. So what's your take on verification? Is it worth it?
Absolutely. Because everybody can claim without having someone ensuring, like, everybody can say, oh, I'm a female, yes, but maybe you own 3%. There has to be a body that is regulating to ensure, although the verification is a long process, without that, anyone can claim to their advantage to say, oh, I'm a minority business because I target minorities and I'm not minority owned, or I'm a female business because I have targeting for females. So yes, you need someone external to be able to ensure that these businesses are who they claim they are. And I think it also should give peace of mind for the people that are buying, that they are putting the money where they say they're going to. So it's a small barrier, but I think as entrepreneurs, as business owners, we're used to barriers. We're going to get through it. We're going to finalize the paperwork and get in front, but we want to do things right. So if that's what we need to do, we want to show that we can do it and set ourselves apart from competitors.
And Celine, how can minority-owned businesses create awareness around their offerings, understanding sometimes limited budget and resources?
Yeah, I think, for me, what I recognize is that, and it's not even just minority, this is any business owner, right? Any business owner, it's like you really have to create something. I keep saying the word value, but it's like, it really is, the bottom line is like, you have to create something that truly is valuable for your consumer base or your community. And I think the way to do that is by creating a story, something that's just beyond just like, hey, I'm going to make a little bit of money on this. And so when you create such a disruptive or such something that connects with consumers, what we understand in this digital world is that this is very much a consumer driven market. And so where the consumers go and the consumers are excited about, businesses are going to follow. I mean, it's the same reason why TikTok and other platforms, they grow, because consumers were there. And since consumers were there, businesses were like, let's follow. So I think what I would do, what I've done as a minority owned business, is focused on delivering the greatest amount of value I possibly can to my consumer, and then finding other businesses that align with those values and try to work with or connect with them to do partnerships or other opportunities. And I think that has turned out to be really a valuable way for us to grow. And I think something that other companies can do, whether you have a small budget or large resources, those types of things, finding people who align with your values, creating a business that's aligned with the value, and finding others that align with that are ways that I feel like you can really prepare yourself.
We'll leave it with one final question. How can we make it easier for minority-owned businesses to connect with the ad industry? Isabel, would you like to take that one?
I mean, I think if there was opportunities within brands and agencies, if they could, and I know some of them are done an amazing job at this, but being able to have those experts within those agencies that understand the culture, they understand these businesses, it's easier to connect with someone like that understands the value and that become your champions. So we've been very, very lucky in finding those champions within some agencies, and has made the change. It has made the business so different. So I think having the expertise within the agency, hiring people of color within the agencies that understand the culture, so we can connect with those people, is an easier way than having to just spend so much time educating. There's nothing wrong with educating, but sometimes it's just nice to sit across somebody that understands what you're saying. And then you can spend more time educating, but you need to have across those agencies more people of color that understand the audience they're going after.
Salim, anything that you wanted to add before we wrap?
No, I mean, I agree. I think at the end of the day, businesses can make it much easier by thinking a little bit more outside the box and how you can work more than just a check. There's plenty of other ways that you can work with minority-owned businesses. But at the end of the day, like I said, it's not goodwill. It really is good business.
Great. Well, thank you to both Isabel and Salim for those insights. We really appreciate you being here.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Be well.
Bye.
Great. So next up, we're going to talk about minority-owned agencies. Sticking with the conversation, minority-owned agencies have historically only been sought after to work on campaigns aimed at reaching diverse communities. How can the industry break the cycle and consider these agencies for general market campaigns? Here to discuss these questions and more, we have Shantae Bacon, founder and CEO, 135 Agency, Rana Reeves, the founder of Ranaverse, and Tish Galindo, founder and CEO of 360 Agency. Hi, everybody.
Hey, how you doing?
Hi, everyone.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So we want to start, Shantae, maybe we could start with you. Can you speak to how large agencies use the total market over the last 10 years to undermine independent minority-owned agencies? How can brands reverse this trend and thereby increase economic power and creative control for people of color?
That's a great question. Thank you so much, Janine. How are you?
I am good. It's good to see you.
Good to see you. So that's a good question. And there are many ways that total market or general market agencies kind of undermine minority-owned agencies. Two of the biggest, I think, that we should probably discuss on this platform is, number one, pretending to be interested in a potential partnership, right? And wanting to meet with the minority-owned agency only to bleed them for ideas or treat them like an internal focus group, or pretend like they're interested in partnership on pursuing a bigger piece of business only to kind of pick their brain. I think that it's really important that we're all ambitious. Everybody's in business to make a profit here, right? Nobody wants, like I think I just heard the previous speaker say something about it's not goodwill, it's good business. No one is expecting this to be, practice work. We all want to make money, but like for example, I'll tell you, I've been called in several times, like, tell me about this Black Twitter thing. Or do you think that this comedian would move the needle with an African-American audience? That's all intellectual property. And it's also things that we should be paid for. And so I think that it just, it's a good step in the right direction of democratizing advertising and really achieving marketing equality and equity for all diverse owners, when the larger agencies actually truly see the value in these minority-owned businesses, not just kind of using them to try to figure out the things that they don't have internally, but look at them as a potential partner to go the distance in winning the business, and not leave them on the side like the roadkill on the road to your new client win. That's number one. And then the second is just marginalizing the value by way of just not being interested in understanding what that business is about. If you don't really know what that small agency is about because you're too busy, you just know that they talk to Black people or they talk to the Latinx community, and you just want them for that, but you don't actually dig in to see what their specialty is, what kind of work they've really done, then you really have to grow a genuine curiosity about what kind of business this is that's sitting in front of you. You have no idea where the value may come from. And too often they're laser focused on the client win, and they're like, how are they useful to that? And then, I'm out of here. And that's the part where it's we could do better than that. I'm all about the marketing equality. It's just laser focused on making sure that there's equal opportunity for everyone to make a profit.
Great. Tish, I'm going to ask this question to you. So what are the pros and cons of working with the following? This was a question submitted to us. Minority-owned agencies affiliated with and partly owned by a major agency holding company, or multicultural agencies that are 100% owned by a major agency company. So whether you're working with a minority-owned agency or an agency that has some ownership there.
Sure.
The major
of course.
groups.
First of all, thank you for having this conversation and hosting this panel, and the incredible work that you're doing. I loved hearing everything Byron Allen had to say, and I'm going to double down on everything he talked about. And if you haven't seen the interview, you really should. I'm speaking to the audience right now. The question on whether, there's value in large agencies that own, have a stake in minority-owned agencies. It comes down to like otherizing and comparing, and that's what we're doing. Like there's this implicit bias that if you're minority-owned, somehow, you're less than. I want to be known for being a remarkable marketer, period. And I understand, and my superpower and my agency's superpower is that we know how to reach the audience. And right now with demographics changing, and what we know is that multicultural is 40% of market share, and that we bring solutions to brands. And so I'm very proud of our results, our track record as an agency, and we happen to be multicultural as well. So that's our superpower. And rather than define or to label a certain agency in terms of, are you, multicultural, are you independently owned? I really want to talk about the approach to market share and where consumers are and how we bring those solutions. And I think that is the value proposition. Who has the expertise to help brands grow? And traditionally, we have not seen people of color in large agencies, and they do great work, but we have not seen enough representation. So going back to what I said about, Alan and his interview, is that this really is about access, representation, and equity to opportunity. So for an agency of our size, in order to be competitive and really bring our best foot forward, we need to be set up to succeed, to be able to provide our best solutions, to compete, and then help brands grow.
Great. So we have a question. Rana, maybe you can take this one. In which marketing segments can minority-owned businesses contribute the most to large agencies and their clients in the right way in 2021?
Cool. Yeah, I think I wanted to start off with kind of even just the term kind of, and Tish alluded to this, like minority-owned. Like I moved to America because I wanted to be in a culture and a marketing and a brand culture that was basically just less homogenous. And if you think about it, 48% of Gen Z are BIPOC, 44% of millennials are BIPOC. Out of the top 20 cities in the US, 16 of them are BIPOC majority. Black and brown people spend more than the GDP of Germany. Like, I don't get how we're a minority anymore. I can talk to it in the abstract that Black culture in this country disproportionately, you know, has an effect. So how are we still the minority is what I want to understand, you know, because I don't see it when I step out in New York. I see it in the ad industry. I see it in agency owners who are like posting black squares and hiring heads of diversity, but you go through their Instagram and they know no black or brown people. In New York, that's crazy. Like how? I don't understand kind of how that works. And I think, you know, what's important to me is how do we create change, right? How do we be the change? It's the reason I set up my own kind of agency. And the first thing I see is the first step is, and I think Shantae talked about this, is the personal, right? I get to work with some amazing clients, Viva, Clinique, General Motors, because the person at the top of that table recognizes the value that myself, my team, and the creatives I'm with can like bring to the table. You know, the second thing is senior agency level kind of partners, right? I'm tired of sitting in meetings with kind of liberal white creative directors. Yeah.
No, go ahead.
Liberal kind of creative directors that think that they know because, you know, they dated a black girl in college or something, you know, and it's ironic because it tends to be the coastal agencies. Like I work with Leo Burnett, Detroit, all white men, right? But they are so open that I'm at the table. And for me, that's what equity feels like, is just being judged on my creativity, my culture. And the third thing, and the reason we're having this panel discussion, and I'm sure like Shantae and Tish, like if panel discussions could change the world will be changed by now, because I've sat on so many. But, you know, the system is systemically racist, right? Procurement, you know, like, and it's not just about minority. This is an intersection around, you know, what money you bring to the table, what education, what class, all of these sorts of things. Did you grow up in New York? You know, I didn't grow up with attorneys, accountants, and a house in the Hamptons, right? I have all of that to get through to do a business. And then you hit me with a 90-day payment term. Like, how am I dealing with that? The other thing is that there has been a huge change, and particularly in the area that I live in, like human rights is not philanthropy, right? It's not, you don't sandwich Black Lives Matter or Stop Asian Hate in between Valentine's and Mother's Day, right? And the consumer has brought that change, and I love it. I'm here for the kids, changing the language, calling people out, all of that sort of thing. And to Shantae's point, you know, that knowledge, that understanding of lexicon, of creativity, of cultural, of intersections, that is worth something. And, you know, I sit in so many meetings with conventional, traditional ad agencies. They can't bring that to the table. Even if I look at my own experience, you know, we work on a lot of pride campaigns. White cisgender men cannot understand the experience of trans women of color, right? And so, yet we'll all sit there doing a campaign on trans women of color. And what's changed is I now have the confidence to speak out, right? Mm-hmm. Every time a brand puts a little black square up, or they say Stop Asian Hate, or they say Trans Lives Matter, or whatever it is, that gives me the right to say, well, what are you actually doing about it?
Absolutely.
Right? In answer to your question, you know, I think I can talk about kind of like what we bring to the table. I can't talk about other agencies. You know, first and foremost, every brand at its root has purpose in some sort of way. So understanding the nuances of what that purpose means. You know, Unilever have been a huge influence on me. Like, you know, I work with some of the coolest brands or so-called coolest brands on the planet. If you told me that the shampoo and the deodorant would be the brands that I was learning off of, I would have been like, no. But, you know, the stuff that they do, they're changing laws. I didn't know as a marketeer I could do that I could have an effect on systemic change and be on the right side of history. Mm-hmm. The second thing is cultural buzz. Like, just understanding relevant moments in time that brands can work with in a really cohesive way. If I tasked with a brand to reach Latinx women, I don't try and come up with it like some agencies. I go ask Latinx women to come to the table and work with me. How are we going to do this? The third thing is influencer and talent engagement. Like, you can tell with work when it's created and the frequency is just kind of wrong. Like, it's the people don't kind of look right. We did a piece of work with a client where, you know, agencies in New York cast Latinx from New York, which is predominantly Dominican or Puerto Rican, but 66% of Latinx are Mexican, right? It's things like that, like where are the Southern accents, things like that. The next thing is future proofing. So a lot of the work that we do is how do you create work that in 2 years doesn't look dated or offensive, right? There is this whole lexicon that I didn't grow up with, right? Unconscious bias, white privilege, white fragility, decolonizing, gaslighting, systemic racism, black folks. Huh?
Sorry, that was my husband in the background.
Blackface, microaggressions, right? How do you future-proof when even the campaign that you're doing this year, the lexicon may change that year? You talk to black and brown people, you talk to queer people, and you ask them what is going on in that community. And then the final thing is just equity and inclusion. Like, we're often asked to look at the sister agencies that we work with, to look at their work, because they just don't get it. Like, it's still crazy that in 2021, I'll see work from an ad agency aimed at black women, and I'll have to push them as to why is the director not a black woman? Why could you not find any black women that can use a camera to do this campaign? And, you know, the basic stuff like that is the stuff that will trip brands up. So I know that's a very long answer, but it's I'm passionate about it.
If I can
A long answer, but an important one.
Yeah.
Oh, sure, Shantae, go ahead.
In the very beginning, he made a key point that I think is part of the why to your question about how general market agencies marginalize, smaller minority-owned companies. When he said, when you go on the Instagram and you see the black box and you see the Stop Asian Hate, then you go through it and it's kind of treated like it's a holiday. Or that they don't know any actual black people. They just kind of celebrate the idea. And I think that corporate America has the challenge of being romanced by the idea of the celebrity black experience, right? They want to experience black culture through their favorite A-list celebrity. And they have the money most of the time to do that or to buy their way into that experience. However, when it comes to actually getting into the community and figuring out where that culture came from, because culture is a byproduct of the socially accepted norms in any community, right? How we worship, how we celebrate, how we mourn, whatever it is that we do in our community, that collected group of norms creates our culture. And then when people transcend the culture and they become big A-list global celebs, they want a piece of that, but they don't want anything to do with the community. So a lot of times people will be very loud and proud, especially after the George Floyd thing, to say, I have black friends or I work with black celebrities, but they don't understand that if the extent of your experience with black people is a celebrity and you don't know any actual working class black people in the community, that you might be a little bit disconnected. And that's the reason why your approach to business is that you put, do something for Black History Month. You do something, you put up a Black Lives Matter thing, but you actually keep missing the actual key connection on why somebody's getting dragged on Black Twitter. And you're just like, oh, I just want to avoid that at all costs. But, you don't want to actually understand why the thought process is what it is. I think that's the missing link, is that we are not a holiday and we are not a celebrity experience. There's many layers to Black culture, to Latinx culture, to any kind of culture, but you have to again have that genuine curiosity, because what starts to happen is that then when you go into, I honestly don't think that the lack of diversity is intentional. I think that everybody hires with who they know, people, they get referrals from people they know, and it is human nature to be in your own box, right? But when you have the power to hire and to manage entire economies, right? So let's look at each advertising campaign as a full economy, a little micro economy all of its own. You're controlling money that's going out to creatives, to strategic planners, to media companies, and all of this. But it's only going to the people that you know. So what happens when that becomes the barrier for anyone outside of your social circle to get access to it? That's where it comes from. If the $8 billion that was spent in the diversity industrial complex actually went out to owners of color, we might not be having endless panels about diversity. That's part of it. Like, you have to invest in not just checking the box and saying, oh, I got my Black partner, I got my chief diversity officer, but actually invest money in understanding what's going on.
Tish, I'd like to turn to you for the next question. We received a question on how should minority-owned agencies be evaluated? Should minority-owned businesses be evaluated the same way as white-owned counterparts?
I want to touch on that, but I know we're running out of time, and God, there's so much passion
There's
here.
so much to say.
So much, and I think we could like take a whole hour on this, and it's so incredibly important. So again, thank you for that. You know, we're talking a lot about the pains that we're feeling as independently owned agencies, as, you know, people of color, and really being marginalized from, this is an economic power struggle, the pull and the push and pull on that. It's wanting creative control and representation. It's wanting equitable opportunity and leveling that playing field. So you're hearing all about that. And really the question is, how do we fix this? How do we change that? And there's a couple of things. It's complex. But it takes, part of it is having these type of conversations. And then it's looking at the why. Why do we need to do this? Well, number one, it's the right thing to do. And it's the right thing to do to give people of color an opportunity when they represent such a large portion of the market share. That it's inherent responsibility in being in a place of power to elevate others and create opportunity. So those two are values-based. And if that doesn't move C-levels to really want to move change and see people of color in their own organizations, or as, you know, in the supply chain, then maybe leaving money at the table is what will move them forward. Because really, when you're not bringing people of color into your own businesses and your enterprises, and you don't have representation and access, but then you're courting that very audience. Audiences today are smart. They have choices, and you know, we as agencies, we're sharing the knowledge with you, but if you're not listening, then we'll share it with your competitor. What we know is that culture equals conversion. We know that when we bring these solutions to enterprise, that we get them closer in relationship to the consumer, the new multicultural America. And so really, I think, you know, you have to look at the why. And why do this? Because it's the right thing to do, and because you're leaving money at the table if you don't. Now, the how, I know that Mark Pritchard is next. It's follow the money. Who holds the purse strings? And C-levels are the decision makers. They are the people in power who get to say, I will not use my money this way if I don't have people of color, if I don't have Black, brown, if I don't have women representation. And it's not up to big agencies. Big agencies service brands. It is the Mark Pritchards of the world, and, you know, congratulations to him. And I hope to see more C-levels take this courageous step and readdressing how they're investing their funding, and not only reinvesting it, but setting us up to succeed within their enterprise. So I know we're out of time, but I really wanted to make sure that I added to all of the passion that Shantae and Rana have expressed. I feel a little rushed and would love to even share more, because there's so much to say about this. But I want to thank you for bringing this conversation forward.
And I appreciate this, and I know there's plenty more to say, and we are running out of time, but I do want to say that we will be hosting, you know, additional panels and town halls moving forward, as we have been. So hopefully this conversation can continue with those and in other venues here. So we appreciate Tish, Shantae, Rana for joining us today, and looking forward to having those conversations both online and offline moving forward.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Jamie.
Jamie.
Thank you. Be well.
All right.
So as we head into this year's upfront negotiations, when media networks will look to secure ad commitments for next season, there will certainly be an onus on brands and agencies to shift more dollars into minority-owned media companies. And we are going to close out the town hall today with a conversation around the imperative for minority-owned media companies to get a bigger share of budgets and how, as an industry, we can ensure some long-term commitments. And joining us to have that conversation, we have Londell McMillan, who is executive publisher of The Source, Mark Pritchard, chief brand officer at Procter & Gamble, and Lindsay Farrar, who's the co-founder, president, and editor-in-chief of Crown Magazine. Hello, all. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hello, thanks for having us. Good to be here.
We're happy to have all of you here for this conversation. So, Londell, I'll kick it off with you. What's been the biggest hurdle in convincing Madison Avenue to allocate media dollars to minority-owned media companies?
Wow, the biggest. I probably would say just historical racial bias has been the biggest from a general standpoint, and I think from a more macro specific standpoint, I think it's just the lack of relationships and understanding and priorities coming from media buyers related to media that's owned and operated by Black and Latinx and other minorities.
And Mark, from a brand perspective, what are the obstacles in investing in minority-owned media?
Well, I would say it's the system. A little over less than a year ago, actually, last June, I think it was, I met with 6 CEOs from Black and Hispanic owned media companies. And I asked them to help me understand why there wasn't more investment in their companies. And they said, well, it's because you work with big agencies who work with big broadcasters on big brands to make big deals. And you're told that you reach multicultural audiences with general market media and that the CPMs are lower. So to you, it's all about reach and CPMs, regardless of whether the media is relevant or effective with our audiences. So that led me to conclude that the system isn't broken. The system was built that way. It was built for the majority. And what we have to do is we have to disrupt and dismantle the system and rebuild a new system to be able to invest in Black, Hispanic, Asian Pacific American, and Native American owned and operated businesses. So what we did is directly reached out then to companies, went out and got a whole list. We've got a list of 500 media companies. We went out and reached and started creating another system. We went to our agency and we indicated, you've got to build a capability to be able to do this, just as you do with all the others. So they started developing that capability. Now what we're doing is we're negotiating directly, and with P&G people negotiating directly with Black, Hispanic, Asian Pacific, and Native American owned and operated companies like Urban One, Central City Productions, Univision, Telemundo, Blavity, Essence, Ebony, Jet, so forth. But we're also putting some other systems in place. What I found is that a lot of our media is bought programmatically, so automatically. And so what we need to do is we need to make sure that we connected the pipes. So we're now doing that work, connecting the pipes, ensuring that we have programmatic capabilities connected to different companies. But I would say the single biggest issue we need to deal with still, and I wish we were further along than we are, is we've got to make sure that we build this in to the expectations of brands of what they need to do. So we've already got an expectation around growing our business with Black, Hispanics, Asian Pacific, and Native Americans. But now we need to move into, and we've started to move into, you need to invest in these media companies. And so we now track it and we review it and we identify where there are gaps. And we also help educate that it's not just about reach and CPM. It's called the 4 R's: reach, representation, relevance, and resonance. You may pay more, but it's going to be more effective because it is more relevant and more resonant. And those are some major steps that we're taking in order to change the system.
Great. Lindsay, I'd like to bring you into the conversation. So can you explain the difference between supporting multicultural content versus purchasing media through a minority-owned business?
Sure. Thanks for having me today. Very happy to be here. I think I have to say to begin that, frankly, to lump half of the US population and frame them as minorities is white-centered and racist at the end of the day. And that is kind of what we're up against in this industry. And we also know that white women and other groups are also included in this definition of minority, when it is convenient to do so. And so we're not only talking about more than half of the country, the piece of the pie for companies like mine, Black-owned media companies like mine, is just shrinking and shrinking and shrinking. We also know that ownership equals wealth, the ability to build and redistribute wealth. It's no secret that dominant culture loves to be entertained by Black faces. That's been true for centuries. So many of these big brands' wealth is driven by our community's influence, our consumerism. Yet we've been locked out of being able to capture that wealth and circulate it to build our own ecosystems. And that's truly the definition of systemic racism in action. There's plenty of divide and conquer tactics, underpaying Black faces, whether that's talent in the form of influencers or celebs or whatever, to be on Black targeted media instead of investing in Black-owned media. I've had conversations with brands and agencies, and they're like, where are all the Black-owned media companies? And it's just like, guys, there are so many reasons that you supposedly can't find Black-owned media companies, and it is because there are the same systems in place that are, in place in other industries, whether that's the personal care industry or, really any industry that you break down in this country suffers from these same principles. Advertisers prefer to work with Black aggregated white-owned media that honestly exists at the expense of, and many times in direct response to, the existence of platforms like Crown Mag. So they have no problem paying full market rate to these white-owned, Black targeted media companies. But then on the flip side there, they want to offer, want to post the Black square, offer charity and contests, and often predatory accelerator programs. And it's in this model, everybody monetizes Blackness and builds wealth from it, except for Black people.
Londell, similar question in the same topic. How do we work then towards understanding the difference and importance of balancing both minority-owned and minority-targeted media environments?
When you say balance, I'm not sure the imperative should be balance for balance sake. I think the imperative should be reaching the audience that's loyal to these brands, that these companies can get a return on their investment. And also, to the point raised earlier, just investing in a community of people who've invested in these products. So if you're looking for balance, you got to understand these white-owned companies that are targeting Black communities, Hispanic communities, they're getting 90% of what would otherwise go to Black-owned media, and then they're selling against Black-owned media. So they're getting the lion's share, and then they're selling against us, basically saying why they're stronger than us, why they're better than us. And so I don't think balance is the key. I think a very serious investment in Black and Latin-owned and Asian-owned businesses needs to be the focus. And I think the accountability to the agencies has to be at a 10 from the brands, whether they're general market agencies or whether they're Black-owned agencies. Sometimes, believe it or not, we're able to get more from white-owned agencies than even Black-owned agencies, because the Black-owned agencies fear that they're going to lose their budgets if they're supporting Black-owned media. So it's very deep, it's very serious, and it's the time to really address it because we bring so much value so many times of the day, and we shouldn't have to wait for legislation or litigation in order to change the situation. We need to do it proactively because it's valuable communities that go into it. And for example, I own the Source magazine. A lot of people don't even know that the Source magazine is now Black-owned. Even Mark mentioned a number of different media companies. The Source magazine used to be white-owned. It's now Black-owned. Okay, we're larger than many of the companies that I heard mentioned earlier, but we're never invited to some of these discussions, and it's part because people are not doing their homework. So the brand should really tap some of these agencies on the wrist for not doing their homework, and they should fire these agencies if they're not investing in Black and Latin businesses. Period. As soon as they start firing agencies and start asking different reps to handle their accounts, that's when change will come. As a CEO and as a lawyer, whenever you hold people accountable and you attach their budgets and their monies to it, that's when change happens.
Just to add to that, if I may, what you have to do is just break down all the myths and the head fakes. So the myths and head fakes. Well, what are the Black-owned, Hispanic-owned, Asian Pacific American, Native-owned companies? Well, here they are. There's 500 of them here. Then when you find out, for example, I asked my team, do we advertise on the Source? So you have to do that as well, which is, okay, if you know that they are, do you advertise there? And then they actually said, yeah, we've done some media buys, but I said, okay, well, why aren't we doing more? Same question on the Crown, by the way, so we'll be back. But the point is that it's putting these systems in place and just breaking down these myths. One of the other myths I hear all the time is scale. I can't get enough scale. It's like, you're missing the point. If that's a majority-owned type of head fake, which is you can't get scale. No, what you need to do is you need to get reach, representation, relevance, and resonance. That's where you need to focus. So, and I would say if it's not your if an agency can't get it done, then you do it as a marketing company. We actually started our own list. We went out, then we engaged our agency. So, okay, now we need to make this a systemic effort. So now we've built it in to how we're doing our planning for next year. And so I would just say, just start breaking those myths down and then making sure that you track what you're doing inside your own company, on your own brands, and put it in front of people. Make sure they know where you're spending your money.
Mark, I have a follow-up question on your point of scale. If you're not looking necessarily at scale, and that's one of the myths, can you talk about some of the measurement ways that you're looking to measure companies that you're working with, if it's different than building scale?
Well, the scale myth, I will tell you what that means. What that means is that's a myth because that gets into the CPM point. Because then CPMs are built for big media buys, and that's where you can get into a situation where you're not paying attention to other ways to look at things. The way we look at it again is we look at, are we reaching the Black, Hispanic, Asian Pacific American, Native American consumer? Are we reaching? But not just are we reaching in a general sense, but are we reaching in a way that is relevant and resonant, which is where specific media companies that were built and are owned by Black, Hispanic, Asian Pacific, and Native. When you have that, then you can get relevance and you can get resonance. And what you can have then, and measure like anything else, just measure the attribution. What are the sales that we're getting on those businesses? This is not rocket science, and I think that's part of the thing that we need to kind of help break down again, is that it's simply putting the measurements in place. How many people are reaching? So far, every company that I've spoken to can tell us how many people we're reaching. Tell us how much it costs. They're telling us that. Tell us how much we get from a CPM basis. They tell us that. Then what we're now working on is making sure that we can put some specific measurement systems in place so we can directly correlate sales. And when we see that, we can get bigger lifts because we have it more, because it is more relevant and more resonant.
Can I add to that point? And Mark, it would be helpful also if the agencies or the brands would say to minority-owned businesses, what CPMs are they looking for us to be competitive? Often it's like kind of they're hiding the ball, and we're kind of we're being asked questions on RFPs. We don't have any insights as to what they're fully looking for in many instances. Some, and this is not all cases, but in many cases we're guessing, we're hoping. Sometimes it's a one-off. Sometimes the challenges are just really enormous, and we need to have more insight and more awareness so that we can make a better pitch as we try to sell our media. That's very, very important, so that we're not guessing and we've got like two hands behind our back. It's very, very important that we have more insights, and their job is really to reach out so that we can make the best proposal for their clients, but that's often not the case.
Indeed.
Londell, I couldn't agree more. We've experienced the same thing, and it's typically very short turnaround times, very specific asks. You're when you're replying to an RFP, you are expected to almost drop everything to create this pitch, and then oftentimes crickets. And like you said, it's you don't know what CPMs you ask, and they aren't giving any real insight. And so you're kind of in this game of, okay, do we just put it all out there, put our best foot forward, and attempt to land this business, or are people just kind of kicking the tires and seeing and gaining insights and taking them and doing with them what they will? And it really speaks to, honestly, there are so many parts of this business that are archaic, that exist in a spreadsheet that is no longer relevant, and is definitely not relevant to Black-owned businesses and more independent media platforms, and really just how people are consuming content these days. And so I think if we were able to step outside of RFP processes and spreadsheets and all of these different things, and really sit down and have conversations about partnership, the scale part, we know we can put money against great content and find people. But the content, the great content part, the context part, that is the part that so many of our businesses do bring to the table, but we have to be able to get to that table.
Lindsay, I want to stay with you for a minute. Byron Allen is leading a call for brands to allocate 2% of media spend to Black-owned media companies. What is your take on this?
I think 2% is one. I think what Byron Allen is doing is so important, and using his influence and his stature to bring this conversation to the forefront is so important. I think 2% is a nice start. I think that media spend at parity with Black consumption is an even better place to start. But it's one of those things. It's like the numbers are so tiny. The transparency is so lacking that where do you even begin? Because we're trying to have these conversations. Hearing someone like a Byron Allen, who's a billionaire, who's a media mogul, reflecting and mirroring so much of the experiences that we've had is just like, wow. I think it's easy to be an independent, bootstrap business, revenue funded. It's easy for you to have that kind of inferiority complex at times. And then when you realize, oh, okay, this is a huge systemic issue that is taking place, and it does not matter who your friends are and how much money you have to throw at it. If Black people make up, for example, 11% of General Motors sales, it's not unreasonable to expect 10 or more % of their media dollars. I think that is, in terms of consumption and what we are keeping so many of these companies alive with not only our consumer dollars, but our influence and the way that we influence the marketplace, the way we make things hot, the way we make things trend. You know, we at Crown Mag, we serve the people that, you know, influence the $1 billion valuation of Clubhouse. We've made Twitter poppin'. We've, you know, we've changed elections, outcomes. We've, you know, been at the helm of so many of the social justice movements in this country and all of the progress, yet we're fighting for 2%. And it's just kind of ridiculous. It isn't to take away from the conversation in that percentage point that Byron and Roland Martin and all of those people are championing, but it is to say, like, can you believe, like, the number, the percentage that we make up of not only the country and the consumer base, and we're fighting over 2%. That should be very telling.
Mark, speaking to that, what is the goal for P&G as it relates to investing in spending in Black-owned media and minority-owned media?
It's actually, the goal is keep doubling it, is consistently go up and up. It's more, I actually like the way Lindsay described, which is looking at the consumption and see whether we could match that. I hadn't thought about that one as a metric. But the key is keep spending more money. I mean, we're looking double, then double again. But I think broader than that is what we're looking at doing is just making the systemic interventions at every level. It's not just spending in media; it's also spending with agencies. We're just launched a program called Widen the Screen, where we're investing with multiple partners and multiple programs, so we can broaden the number of Black creators in the entire ecosystem. So we can just continue to widen not only the way the Black community and other communities are portrayed, but also widen the opportunities. This is just something that brands like ours should be able to do, which is just keep investing and continue to build. Because there is, as everybody has said today, there's so much opportunity out there, and it's not going to change unless we just keep doubling down on investing over and over and over again. That's one of the reasons why we changed our entire system from a media standpoint this year, is that we are now going out and doing just as we do with the other big companies. We are looking across and engaging directly with Black-owned, Hispanic-owned, Asian Pacific, and Native American-owned companies.
Great. Well, I think we're running out of time, unfortunately. I would love to continue this conversation. We'll have to have you all back again soon. But I think that's all the time we have for today. So Janine and everybody, thank you so much to our panelists. Thanks to Lindsay, Londell, and Mark, and thanks to our earlier panelists as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all for joining us. So yes, thank you to all the panelists who took the time today to thoughtfully and passionately answer these questions. Thank you to those watching and for your insightful questions. Please keep them coming. Keep an eye on adage.com/events for information on our next town hall. Thank you, Jessica, for joining me today. And a special thank you to our Ad Age crew, Alfred Mascaroni, Anna Sakula, Max Sternlicht, and Elise Liffring for making this live stream happen. Thanks everyone for tuning in.
Thanks, everybody.